It's a brand new week. Welcome to Business Morning. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. While a lot of commuters who ply the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway may have woken up this morning with a lot of butterfly in their stomach as to what becomes of the road today because of the partial closure and the diversion. Well, the information reaching us just before the start of the show says the diversion is yet to start, but workers are already on ground to enforce this diversion, and so traffic for now is still flowing. However, it's important for motorists plying that route to be patient and drive carefully. And of course, once that is done, everything will be all right. And look at the business calendar for this week. It looks a bit busy, but here are a few events lined up for the week. Tuesday, September 3rd, looks quite heavy. The Nigerian Chamber of Commerce will hold a breakfast meeting with theme Succession Planning Strategies, Growing Your Business Beyond You. And this will take place here in Lagos. And the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria will also hold its training on mandatory professional training program on the same day. Tuesday, September 3rd is also the day Forte Oil PLC has scheduled to hold its annual general meeting in Lagos. The National Bureau of Statistics will also on this day release the GDP numbers for the second quarter of the year. Also on this day, the Africa Sovereign Wealth and Pension Fund Leader Summit and Infrastructure Award 2019 will hold in Cape Town, South Africa. And then on Wednesday, September 4, EFINA, in collaboration with the Shared Agent Network Expansion Facility, will hold its quarterly Financial Services Agent Forum in Abuja. And while Philips Consulting Limited will on the same day hold a webinar with the title Information Security, a Key Enabler of Business Continuity. Flour Mills of Nigeria PLC has also scheduled to hold its annual general meeting on this day here in Lagos. On Thursday, September 5, the Northern Nigeria Flour Mills PLC will on this day hold its annual general meeting in Kano, while the Female Entrepreneurship Empowerment Network International Summit holds in Abuja. And on Friday, September the 6th, the Lagos Retail Festival will take place here in Lagos. Well, that's just but a few of the events to expect this week. And this is a reminder that if you have in your possession overused or mutilated Naira notes, you are required by the Central Bank of Nigeria Clean Note Policy Deposits to deposit such notes at any branch near you. And today, Monday, September 2, is the deadline to do so. As part of its efforts to improve the overall quality of the Naira notes in circulation, the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced the Clean Note Policy and Banknotes Fitness Guidelines. Please note that overused notes include any Naira note that is now weak to such an extent that it could easily tear at further handling or processing. Mutilated notes include any Naira note that has been partially or permanently damaged, but which clearly still has more than half of its original size together. The Central Bank has also assured bank customers that they would not be charged any fee for returning those mutilated Naira notes. And to the markets now, profit taking on index heavyweights ensured that Nigeria's equity market gave up gains posted from the prior week. The benchmark index dipped by about 1% just last week to 27,525.81. Let's cross over now to Temple for details as well as analyst outlook on the market for the month of September. Temple, the all-share index gained marginally on Wednesday and Friday. However, the negative sentiment seen in the other trading days in the week dragged the overall index. Tell us more. Absolutely,
Chimeze. I mean, we got just 2 days of gains and 3 days of losses for last week only. And in total, we lost over 133 billion naira in equities capitalization. That, in spite of the fact that we got those gains, month to date looked fairly positive eventually, but the week to date was not too good, down by some 0.99%. Of course, that's about 1%, as you said earlier. The year to date actually worsened to 12.42%. If we go by the activity level of the market for last week, we saw a decline as well in the volume of transactions, down by some 32%. And of course, value of the transactions we saw, which is put at 13.29 billion naira, was down actually by 50% compared to what we had in the preceding week. Total transactions or trades last week was 16,237. If you look at the sectoral performance of the market, we got gains in only two of the 5 major sectors that we have. We saw gains around the industrial goods and, of course, the insurance sector of the market. But starting with the banking names, due to some kind of capital appreciation, we saw a little bit of profit taking on the likes of Zenith Bank and ETI, which was earlier in the week trending around some 5 naira. 4 to 5 naira per share, and of course that was really low. So investors took advantage of that, coupled with the positive news that trailed the company for the greater part of last week. That's why we saw this particular company, deeping for week on week by 9.4%. Consumer goods, Unilever was down, Dangote Sugar was down. There's a peculiar, due to some peculiar stories around them. Industrial goods, of course, was also positive. Dangote Cement was up, was a major mover in that side. We got CCNN, we got WAPCO, maintaining the momentum we've been seeing around these two companies in recent time. Insurance sector was positive with some gains around mutual benefits and Continental Insurance. Oil and gas is a major drag for the markets last week. Seplat in particular was down by more than 18% for the greater part of the week. Of course, we know that there's been some negative news around the chairmanship of that company. Now, not that they have a corporate governance issue, no, but that the chairman has some assets, Sheba Exploration Limited, and of course Allen Limited, which are two companies of his that now have to be taken over by Amcon. The news broke just around before the weekend setting for us yesterday, so investors reacted ahead of that news. And of course, we know that Total was down by 5.48%. These two put together impacted negatively on the oil and gas sector, and that's how we got a decline of 10.76%. Telecom was cool. Airtel remained unchanged for the second week consecutively. Let's move on to the NASDOTC, talk about the unquoted securities market. That was positive by more than 1% last week. We got market capitalization hovering around 517 billion naira, in spite of the fact that volume of transactions for last week was not too impressive. For the fixed income side of the market, we got average yields for both the bonds and treasury bills now deepened by some 88 basis points to 14% on the average. Of course, that was driven by some downside that we saw across the two key instruments. If you look at the bonds market, that saw some decline by some 21 basis points to 14.9%. And of course, treasury bills has got, in spite of the OMO auctions that we saw last week, treasury bills yields also declined across the short and mid end of the curve by some 137 basis points for the short end of the curve and 224 basis points for the mid end of the curve. Now, talking about the review of all of these more analytically, we've got Adedayo Bakari, who's a research analyst with AfriInvest here with us on the program. Good morning, Adedayo.
Thanks for having me.
It's a brand new week. I do hope it's going to be bullish for us all in the markets, equities, and across the bonds and treasury bill side of the market. But let's begin with your own side of your perspective, basically, of the market last week. How would you say things, went? It was bullish at the fixed income side of things, but for equities, it was not too good. What were the drivers?
Well, for equities, it was mainly, there were a lot of company-specific news which affected performance. Like you rightly mentioned, news around Seplat, affected the stock and pulled down the oil and gas index. You'd also see that also we had, very large cap stocks lose last week, and that was due to gains that they've accrued over the preceding week.
Yeah.
So the likes of Guarantee, the likes of Zenith. So we believe there's a bit of profit-taking activities in some of the stocks. So mainly company-specific news, profit-taking activities was mainly what we saw in the market. Overall, the sentiment in the market also remain bearish. There's based on our in-house tracker of how strong sentiment is during the week. Last week we saw a moderation in the index, and we think that is due to still the climate in Nigeria, which is still not suitable for investing in equities.
So in essence, what you noticed wasn't so different from what we actually found at Charters.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So let's talk about some of the earnings, and of course a bit of forward guidance now into the new week. UBA's numbers actually came in on Friday, and things were quite impressive around this particular company. Gross revenue rose by some 13.9%. You got profit before tax, profit after tax up by 20 and then 29% respectively. And of course, 20 copper dividend is coming on board. How much of reaction are you expecting from traders, investors this week? And is it likely to shape things for us this week?
Yeah, I mean, for UBA is the stock has been badly bruised over the since the beginning of the year. It's not doing very, very well, and based on our projections, dividend yield is in double digits currently. Right. It's actually offering one of the best yields in terms of dividends compared to tier 1 banks or even any bank in Nigeria. So it's very, very good. We believe investors should actually look to buy into UBA stock. Overall, the what was interesting about the performance was even though I mean compared to other tier 1 peers rather, you saw that there was an expansion in interest income, and there was also a very strong expansion in non-interest income for UBA. But interestingly, one of the drags which we continue to see in the performance of UBA is operating costs, which is still very, very high. And also when you think in terms of interest expense, it's also very, very high. Interest expense grew by more than 20%. In comparison, what actually helped GT Bank in half year was actually a moderation in the company's interest expense. So we believe that is one area where where UBA has to improve upon. Overall, it was a very good outing for them.
Okay, this is a tier 1 bank, and I think before we move on, we should also touch on Access Bank, which announced on Friday that the half-year numbers are still being put together. Of course, the delay is due to the mergers between them and Diamond Bank, and so it won't be later than the 15th of this month, which is September. What are your thoughts on this particular company?
It's not unexpected. I mean, according to the market regulations, you have up to 60 days when the financial year ends to present your results. Okay. But most of these results have to go through approvals as well. The CBN has to look at it, which is the primary regulator of the banking industry. Right. And in light of the merger between the former old Diamond Bank and Access, and all sorts of accounting issues that have to be considered. Yeah. And when you take into when you recognize that also this books being presented is actually going to be audited. So it's basically auditing the operations of the old Diamond and the new Access, and looking at ways to combine the numbers. Then you expect that maybe there are some issues around that, but hopefully we get to see the numbers very, very soon.
Are you sure those two key banks under the tier 1 sector now will be able to meet the LDR of given the deadline, which is for this month?
Well, it's going to be difficult, obviously, and I believe it's not going to be drastic in terms of achieving it, because the regulation actually came late into the year, and these banks have drawn up their strategy at the beginning of the year, so it's actually not going to be easy for them to reverse course. However, we see a situation where banks are actually improving lending through newer initiatives. You see the Access Bank, you see GTB2 extending consumer credit. Will this be enough? We do not think it's going to be enough. However, we believe there should be a bit of forbearance on the part of the CBN once you see that they're working towards.
Do you foresee any form of extension in any case?
Yes, I believe. I mean, if they don't if they don't meet it, you can only help them to adjust, and they've shown a consistent pattern of improvement.
I want to believe you've also seen Fidelity Bank's numbers. I mean, they had a moderation in their NPL ratio by some 30 basis points. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Fidelity too was a good performance. Right. Interest income, the top line was good. There was an expansion in interest income. Okay. However, the also major source of pressure was in terms of interest expense. Right, it was a very strong increase, and that affected the net interest income of the bank. Also, when you think in terms of operating expenses, it's also very strong. There was a strong increase for Fidelity, which affected performance a bit. However, the positive news mainly was in terms of impairments, loan loss provisioning, which was there was actually a write back during H1 2019, which was very good for them. And overall, when you look at the bottom line, it was a very strong performance for them. So it was a good outing for Fidelity as well in the first half of the year.
I think they're even trading at a premium higher than their peers like FCMB at this point in time. A bit of the consumer goods segment before we move to the fixed income, where we'll wrap things up. Our consumer goods sector of the market now, we saw PZ numbers trickling in on Friday as well, I think. Even though we saw a little bit of traction on the share price, capital appreciation on Wednesday, I guess, when it actually shot up by some 10%. What did you make of that? In spite of the 15 kobo that they are posting, the revenue and sales, everything on that, the key metrics were really down.
It was not a good performance at all for PZ. And one of the major reasons is what we've cited several times. Consumer spending is still very weak in the market, and the intensity of competition in the consumer goods space
doesn't mean folks are no longer buying Imperial leather, some of the other.
Well, it doesn't mean that they are not buying. It means that maybe they are switching to informal alternatives, for instance, that are cheaper due to pressed wallets. So that could be, a substitution that is going on in the market, and formal players are having to contend with all these issues. So when you think in terms of the revenue moderated by around 8%, right. And cost of sales was very high. And when you think in terms of putting both together, you look at the gross profit of the company, and you see that it was down sharply by about 30%. Operating profit was down by around 70%. Bottom line was down around 36%.
But in spite of all of this, they're able to propose some 15 kobo dividend.
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on the strategy of the company. Right. Not all companies. I mean, you have retained earnings. You can pay dividends out of retained earnings. Okay. You can also pay a bit. I mean, they made profit. They made a profit of around 1.2 billion from 1.9 billion in the same period of 2018. So it was a very sharp moderation, but we believe there's still an allowance for them to pay dividend. And if you notice, the dividend was weaker, 15 kobo. This period of last year, it was 20 kobo. That was paid.
Was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so let's talk about the fixed income side of the market now to wrap things up. I mean, the preceding week we saw yields climbing, skyrocketing seriously, and all of a sudden this week we saw a bit of decline. What happened?
Liquidity. So there was a very strong increase in liquidity in the market this week. Last week. And that was because of maturities you have in the market. So there was over 300 billion of maturities, which was very significant. And also, if you notice, in the previous week, foreign investors have actually shied away from the market a bit. And from the OMO auctions we saw during the week too, you see that investors were demanding for higher rates. And you will see that for the OMO auction, for the primary market auction as well, there was a gradual increase in rates at each of the auctions. So we believe it's really just a bit of the improved liquidity in the system, which was actually very strong, increase in liquidity, as well as a bit of foreign investor participation due to gradually, the increasing rates we're seeing in the market to compensate for risks.
Because again, in the preceding week, I mean, we saw yields at about 14%, which was really attractive. So was it that they reinvested some of those coupons?
Absolutely. Once you stay off the market and you're not buying, there are going to be sell-offs. And once you have sell-offs in the market, you have yields rise. So basically, we feel they stayed on on the sidelines, and we saw a bit more participation last week, and that was what led to an increase in demand and the consequent moderation in yields that we saw.
So do you foresee buy sentiment, buy interest to increase again this week?
This week too, we're expecting, it really depends overall on CBN's operation in the market.
Okay.
And we're expecting also a lot of UMO maturities this week generally. And so everything, the direction of trading would mainly depend on what CBN comes out to do. So if we see a very strong, a very aggressive mopping up of liquidity, we could see rate inch slightly upwards. But if CBN is a bit less aggressive in its stance to, mop up liquidity, then we could see a further moderation this week.
External reserves down to more than 5 months low now, some over 1 billion naira,
Yes.
$1 billion actually was wiped up. So I guess the strategy on the part of the CBN will continue to be that of tightening.
Exactly.
Anyways, Adedayo Bakre, thanks a great deal for your time. We appreciate your insight on Business Morning this morning. Chimeze, back to you now.
Thank you for staying tuned. Well, activities at both the Treasury and the bond markets were bullish last week. Let's see how the week has started off. I'm being joined by Bosun Obembe, one of the fixed income dealers at Access Bank. He joins us now from the FMDQ marketplace. Thank you for joining us, Bosun. Well, the fixed income market has just resumed trading for the week. What sentiment have you observed so far, and what is your outlook for the market for the rest of the week and, of course, the month of September?
Okay, so last week what we saw was a bullish trend for 4 out of the 5 trading days. So there was a normal auction on Friday where CBN sold about 200 million into the system. So the stop rate on the 364, the long at 13.5. So today there is a FX auction. CBN is expected to conduct OCL SMIs where $100 million will be injected into the system. So, and they will inject 55 million each SME and invisible segment. So this will impact on the funding. So we expect the market to be calm. So we expect a bearish sentiment today. So for this week, we have a majority about 200 billion in normal B. So we expect transaction to still be at the 12% levels. But next week, this month we have about 1.67 trillion in these maturing. So the stop rate to actually on the longer to increase to %.
All right, Mr. Obembe. Well, let's look at the currency side. What are your expectations?
So on the currency side, what we've seen is the CBN has shown the offshore that it has the capacity to actually intervene in the market. So the inflow report, CBN, the month-on-month, there about 1.1 billion intervention by CBN to the investor and exporters window. So week on week, what we saw was an appreciation of about 21 kobo. So 0.93 last week. So this week we expect the same trend. We expect rate to be at 362 levels, maybe 362 half. We expect the sell-off that we witnessed the previous month where offshores were trying to get. We don't expect that to continue, given that CBN has the capacity. So CBN has been able to meet the offshore demand currently at 362 level. So we don't expect this trend of a sell-off from the offshore to continue.
All right,
CBN has shown the capacity.
All right, thank you, Bosun Obembe, for your time. Well, we sincerely apologize for that poor audio there. It's all because of poor network there. Sometimes it does happen. Anyway, let's look at the equities market. We cross over now to Temple at the Stock Exchange. Good morning again, Temple. So how promising is this new month looking for the markets?
Well, it looks like the market will open in the green today because as we speak, we're seeing some uptick. The all-share index is up some 0.32% right now, and we're seeing interest across the tier one names in the market. You've got the likes of Access Bank being watched, and of course the likes of UBA also being watched. Given the fact that last week UBA had hinted about the numbers, its H1 2019 numbers coming out, having waited for the CBN to give approval. We saw a lot of traction around UBA the week before now, and so right about now the interest or buy interest that we are seeing on this particular company is still less than 1 million units. When you compare to the likes of Access Bank that on Friday, gave a forward guidance about the release of its own H1 2019 numbers scheduled to be released not later than the 15th of September. So now we've seen more than, I think, close to 2 million units of Access Bank shares being traded in the market. Of course, it's rising. While UBA has risen by more than 5% this morning, gaining some 35 kobo to put it in around 6 naira 20 kobo. We've seen Access Bank, done a little bit of increase as well, but not as high as that of UBA in absolute terms. However, these two key companies are rising. Fidelity Bank also is making some moves at this point in the market. But generally, I think the banking side of the market or the banking stocks will be where we'll see some key tractions for the greater part of this week, given the potentials or the profits that's at stake on that side of the market. The dividend of 20 kobo will be paid or across UBA counter for the shareholders, and of course Access Bank, we're yet to know what will be coming from this particular company. Other news we're getting now in the market is that of Seplat. Seplat PLC issued a notice to the stock exchange and of course to the investing public, saying that Seplat is independent of Sheba Exploration Oil and Gas Company and of course Allen Oil and Gas Company. These are two key companies that belongs to the chairman of Seplat, Mr. Ambrose Ojako. But these are two key companies that the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria is looking to take over, given an injunction that they got from an Abuja High Court. And so Seplat is saying that these two companies have no relationship by way of subsidiary or indirect ownership to their company, and they are tracking, they're watching this, but issuing this notice to the stock exchange is in line with the post-listing demands or obligations of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, in line or in accordance with the rule book of the NSE, to make the public and the regulators know that Seplat is a safe company. Because again, if you look at how Seplat performed last week, the performance was really lackluster. They lost more than 18%, 18.84% week on week last week, and I think some investors, have had that story, and they had to actually, react to that by selling down. If you look at share price of Seplat right now, it is still in the red. So last week it fell below 400 naira to some 380 something naira or thereabout. This is a company that regularly trades around 550 naira and all of that, in spite of the overall weak sentiments that we have seen in the markets. But we'll only continue to watch to see how this sort of notice and circular to the stock exchange, will change the sentiment of investors, of confidence of investors on this company for this week, Chimeze.
Or to tell us about that later in the day during our afternoon show when you will be speaking with BC. Thank you, Temple. Well, just before I leave you there, a quick reminder again that if you have in your possession overused or mutilated Naira notes, you are required by the Central Bank of Nigeria clean note policy to deposit such notes at any branch near you. And today, Monday, September 2, is the deadline to do so. Well, as part of its efforts to improve the overall quality of the Naira notes in circulation, the Central Bank of Nigeria had introduced the clean note policy and banknotes fitness guidelines. Please note that overused notes include any Naira note that is now weak to such an extent that it could easily tear at further handling or processing. Mutilated notes include any Naira note that has been partially or permanently damaged, but which clearly still has more than half of its original size together. While the central bank has also assured bank customers that they will not be charged any fee for returning those mutilated notes, Naira notes. And that is if you do that as at today. Well, it's on that note that we wrap up today's edition of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago.